Saudi Arabia to invest $1 trillion in the U.S. Could this be Bible prophecy? Saudi Arabia just pledged $1 trillion, the largest investment in American history. On November 18, 2025, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman met Trump to finalize weapons deals, AI partnerships, and nuclear agreements that match Ezekiel's end times coalition. You will be shocked when you discover 5 findings that suggest this trillion-dollar deal positions nations exactly where biblical prophecy predicts. Number 1. The meeting that shook the world. What actually happened on November 18, 2025. You need to understand something that most Christians have completely missed. Arabia is all over the Bible. From Genesis to Revelation, Arabian nations appear repeatedly, not as background characters, but as central players in God's prophetic timeline. While most prophecy teaching focuses exclusively on Israel, Europe, and Russia, Scripture mentions Arabian territories by name dozens of times. November 18, 2025. The Oval Office. A 90-minute private meeting between President Donald Trump and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, known globally as MBS. But this wasn't just another diplomatic meeting. This wasn't a courtesy visit. This wasn't a photo opportunity. This was the meeting that would reshape the global economy, redefine Middle East alliances, and, if you understand biblical prophecy, position nations exactly where Scripture predicted they would be in the last days. To understand the significance of November 18th, you need to understand the history between Donald Trump and Mohammed bin Salman. When Trump took office in January 2017, his first foreign trip as president was to Saudi Arabia, specifically to Riyadh in May 2017. This was unprecedented. Most presidents visit European allies first. Trump went to Saudi Arabia. At that trip, Trump and the Saudi leadership announced $450 billion in proposed deals, though only a fraction materialized. But more importantly, Trump formed a personal bond with MBS, who was then Deputy Crown Prince and would become Crown Prince just 1 month later. On November 18, 2025, MBS arrived at the White House. No aides initially, no press, just the 2 leaders, translators, and key advisors. What were they discussing? Topic number 1, the Iranian threat. Both the US and Saudi Arabia see Iran as their primary regional adversary. According to statements released later, MBS said Trump's actions made Saudi Arabia safer. The conversation included discussions about the Abraham Accords and potential Saudi normalization with Israel. The core of the meeting was military partnership, F-35 fighter jet sales, tank purchases, designation of Saudi Arabia as a major non-NATO ally. After the 90-minute private meeting, Trump and MBS emerged and made a joint announcement to the press. And that's when MBS dropped the bombshell. Saudi Arabia would nearly double its investment commitment from $600 billion to approximately $1 trillion. Trump, standing beside him, called it a huge success and praised MBS as a very good friend and extremely respected man. MBS, for his part, praised Trump's leadership and reiterated Saudi Arabia's long-term commitment to partnership with the United States. The global reaction was immediate. Stock markets surged. Defense stocks jumped 4%. Technology stocks rose. Media headlines screamed about the deal of the century. Prophecy teachers were calling this the most significant prophetic development in years. Why? Because what happened next, at the U.S.-Saudi Investment Forum on November 19th, revealed the true scope of what had been agreed upon. The November 19 Forum, where the deals were signed. The day after the Oval Office meeting, a U.S.-Saudi Investment Forum was held in Washington, D.C. This wasn't just a press conference. This was a signing ceremony with over 100 CEOs in attendance. Major American executives were there. Elon Musk, CEO of Tesla, SpaceX, and XAI. Jensen Huang, CEO of NVIDIA. Tim Cook, CEO of Apple. Representatives from Google, Microsoft, BlackRock, and dozens of other corporations. And at that forum, $270 billion in immediate deals were signed on camera. That's the down payment, the first installment of the trillion-dollar commitment. Let me break down exactly what was agreed upon. Because when you see the details, you'll understand why this is far more than just money. This is the merging of two nations' futures, economically, militarily, and technologically. Defense deals, $50 to $100 billion over 5 years. The defense component of the trillion-dollar deal is the most visible and the most strategically significant. 48 F-35 Lightning II stealth fighter jets. This is the centerpiece. The F-35 is the most advanced fighter jet in human history. 5th-generation stealth technology, integrated sensors, network-centric warfare capabilities, unmatched air superiority. The U.S. has been extremely selective about who can purchase F-35s. Currently, only a handful of nations operate them. NATO allies, UK, Italy, Netherlands, Norway, Denmark, Belgium, Poland. Close partners, Israel, Japan, South Korea, Australia, Singapore. For years, Saudi Arabia requested F-35s, and for years, the U.S. said no. The concern was twofold. Concern number one, Israel's qualitative military edge, QME. U.S. law requires that Israel maintains military superiority over its neighbors. Selling advanced weapons to Arab nations, even friendly ones, risks undermining that edge. Israel has its own F-35s, called the F-35IP, Adir. They're customized with Israeli systems and are the most advanced variant. But Israel still opposed selling any version to Saudi Arabia. But on November 18, 2025, Trump greenlit the sale. Why? Several reasons. Reason number one, Iran's growing threat. What this means, selling 48 F-35s to Saudi Arabia signals a deep, long-term alliance. You don't give your most advanced weapons to temporary partners. You give them to nations you're binding yourself to for decades. This isn't just business. This is strategic commitment. The U.S. and Saudi Arabia are now militarily intertwined. 300 M1A2 Abrams main battle tanks. On top of the F-35s, Saudi Arabia is purchasing nearly 300 American-made Abrams tanks. These aren't basic tanks. The M1A2 Abrams is one of the most advanced main battle tanks in the world. 120mm smoothbore cannon. Composite armor. Withstands most anti-tank weapons. Advanced targeting systems. Thermal imaging for night operations. Network connectivity for coordinated warfare. Saudi Arabia already operates older Abrams variants. These 300 new tanks upgrade their ground forces significantly. Tanks are defensive weapons primarily. They defend territory, secure borders, and deter ground invasions. Saudi Arabia isn't planning to invade anyone with these tanks. They're deterring Iran, and Iranian-backed militias. This aligns with Ezekiel 38:13's prediction that Saudi Arabia will protest, but not fight, when Israel is invaded. They're arming for defense, not offense. Major non-NATO ally designation. One of the most significant elements of the defense agreement is Saudi Arabia's new designation as a major non-NATO ally, MNNA. This is a formal status granted by the U.S. to a limited number of nations. Being in MNNA doesn't mean you're in NATO, but it does mean priority access to U.S. military equipment and technology, participation in defense research and development, streamlined arms, sales, and transfers, enhanced intelligence sharing, eligibility for training, loans, and cooperative programs, stockpiling of U.S. military equipment on your territory. Saudi Arabia joining this list signals permanent strategic partnership. This isn't temporary. This is long-term alliance. But prophecy watchers ask, is this the alignment Ezekiel predicted? Is this the economic framework for Daniel's covenant? Is this the stage setting for the tribulation? But to understand why, we need to identify Saudi Arabia in Scripture. We need to see what the Bible actually says about this nation. And we need to connect ancient prophecies to modern headlines. Let me show you the prophetic identity of Saudi Arabia. Discovery number 2. The prophetic identity of Saudi Arabia. For the trillion-dollar deal to have prophetic significance, we first need to prove that Saudi Arabia is actually mentioned in the Bible. Because if it's not, then this is just economics and politics with no spiritual relevance. But if Saudi Arabia is mentioned in Scripture, if God predicted its role in the end times, then what's happening right now is stage setting for the final countdown. So let me show you where Saudi Arabia appears in end times prophecy. And the answer is crystal clear. Ezekiel 38:13, the key verse. Turn to Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 13. This is part of the Gog-Magog prophecy, one of the most detailed end times prophecies in the entire Bible. Ezekiel 38:13. Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish, with all the young lions thereof, shall say unto thee, Art thou come to take a spoil? Hast thou gathered thy company to take a prey, to carry away silver and gold, to take away cattle and goods, to take a great spoil? Let me break down this verse because every name is significant. Who are Sheba and Dedan? Sheba and Dedan are ancient kingdoms located in the Arabian Peninsula. Biblical scholars and historians have identified them based on geographic location. Both were in what is now Saudi Arabia. Trade routes. Ancient caravans passed through these regions carrying frankincense, myrrh, gold, and spices. Historical records. Extra-biblical sources confirm these were Arabian kingdoms. Sheba, located in southwestern Arabia, in what is now Yemen and southern Saudi Arabia. The famous Queen of Sheba, who visited King Solomon, 1 Kings 10, came from this region. Dedan, located in northwestern Arabia, near modern-day Al-Ula in Saudi Arabia, an important trading center along the ancient incense route. So when Ezekiel says Sheba and Dedan, he's referring to the Arabian Peninsula, specifically the territory that is now Saudi Arabia. In biblical symbolism, lions represent nations or kingdoms. Young lions means offspring nations, colonies that came from Tarshish. If Tarshish is Britain, the most common identification, then the young lions are British colonies that became independent nations. The United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Among these, which is the most powerful? Which has global military reach? Which fits the description of partnering with Saudi Arabia? The United States. What does Ezekiel predict these nations will do? Now, look at what Ezekiel says. These nations, Saudi Arabia and the Western powers, will do when Russia and Iran invade Israel. Shall say unto thee, Art thou come to take a spoil? Hast thou gathered thy company to take a prey? They question the invasion. They raise diplomatic protests. They ask, Are you invading to plunder? To steal resources? But notice what they don't do. They don't intervene militarily. They don't send troops. They don't defend Israel with force. They just talk. They protest. They object. But they don't act. This describes the exact alliance being formed right now. Think about what the trillion-dollar deal creates. Saudi Arabia, Sheba, and Dedan, plus United States, young lions, equals economic and military partnership. They're not allied to attack Israel. They're allied for regional stability, defense against Iran, economic cooperation, and technological advancement. And when the Ezekiel 38 invasion happens, when Russia, Iran, Turkey, and others attack Israel, Saudi Arabia and the U.S. will be positioned exactly as the Bible predicted, economically aligned with the West, militarily equipped, F-35s, tanks, advanced weapons, diplomatically opposed to Iran and Russia, but not directly defending Israel. They'll protest, they'll condemn, they'll issue statements, but they won't send troops. Why? Because by that time, America may have already collapsed, if America is Babylon from Revelation 18. Or America may be too weak, too divided, too war-weary to intervene. Either way, the alignment is forming exactly as Ezekiel predicted 2,600 years ago. Capability without commitment. Strength without intervention. The historical alignment. For 1,900 years, this prophecy seemed impossible. How could Saudi Arabia, Sheba, and Dedan ally with Western powers? The West was Christian, the Arabian Peninsula was Muslim, and the two were adversaries. But in the 21st century, everything changed. But the prophetic significance goes beyond just the alliance. Because this deal isn't just positioning nations, it's positioning the timeline. And that brings us to the third discovery. The timing of this trillion-dollar investment matches Daniel's prophetic clock for the covenant with many. Let me show you what I mean. Discovery number 3. The timing matches. We've established that Saudi Arabia is Sheba and Dedan from Ezekiel 38. We've shown that the trillion-dollar deal is positioning nations exactly as the Bible predicted. But now we need to ask, when does this happen? What's the timing? Where are we on the prophetic timeline? And the answer connects directly to one of the most important prophecies in the entire Bible. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. This verse describes the event that triggers the 7-year tribulation period. Let me break down the key phrases. He shall confirm the covenant. The he is the Antichrist, the prince that shall come, from verse 26. He will confirm, strengthen, guarantee, enforce a covenant. With many. Not with one nation, not with two. With many. A multilateral agreement involving multiple parties. For 1 week. In Daniel's prophecy, weeks are weeks of years. 1 week equals 7 years. This is the tribulation period. So Daniel predicts, a future world leader will confirm a peace agreement involving many nations for 7 years. That confirmation triggers the start of the tribulation. The covenant isn't the trillion-dollar deal. Let me be very clear. The U.S.-Saudi investment agreement is not the covenant from Daniel 9:27. Why? Because the Antichrist hasn't been revealed yet. It's not a 7-year agreement. It doesn't involve Israel directly. Daniel's covenant centers on Israel. The tribulation hasn't started. So this trillion-dollar deal is not the fulfillment of Daniel 9:27. Think about what Daniel 9:27 requires. A major world leader brokers a comprehensive Middle East peace deal involving many nations, including Israel, for 7 years. For that to happen, several conditions must be met. Nations that trade together, invest in each other, and depend on mutual prosperity are more likely to maintain peace agreements. The trillion-dollar deal creates exactly that. Deep economic integration between Saudi Arabia and the United States. Their economies are now intertwined. Their futures are linked. Military alliances must be established. Peace agreements require security guarantees. Israel won't sign a treaty unless they trust that it will be enforced. Arab nations won't normalize unless they feel protected from Iranian threats. The F-35 sale, the tanks, the defense agreements, all of this creates the military framework that could underpin a future peace covenant. The progression is clear. Here's the sequence. Abraham Accords, 2020. UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan normalize with Israel. Framework established. U.S.-Saudi investment deal, 2025. Saudi Arabia and U.S. merge economically, militarily, technologically. Economic foundation laid. Saudi-Israeli normalization, future. Saudi Arabia joins Abraham Accords, potentially bringing most of the Arab world with them. Comprehensive Middle East peace covenant, future. A leader guarantees the agreement for 7 years, possibly including provisions for rebuilding the Jewish temple. Daniel 9:27. Fulfilled. The tribulation begins. We're not at step 5 yet. We're not even at step 4. But we're watching steps 2 and 3 unfold in real time. The trillion-dollar deal isn't the covenant, but it's positioning the pieces so the covenant can be signed. We've seen how the trillion-dollar deal positions nations for Daniel's covenant. We've identified Saudi Arabia as Sheba and Dedan. We've traced the economic and military alliances being formed. But there's a darker aspect to all of this. Because while the world celebrates peace, prosperity, and partnership, the Bible warns that the last days will be marked by deception. And this trillion-dollar deal fits the deception pattern perfectly. The 3 warnings about end times deception. Scripture gives us 3 specific warnings about deception in the last days, and all 3 apply directly to what's happening with the U.S.-Saudi alliance. Warning number 1. Peace and safety. Deception. 1 Thessalonians 5:3. 1 Thessalonians 5:1-3. But of the times and the seasons, brethren, ye have no need that I write unto you, for yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say, Peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. Paul warns, right before sudden destruction falls, people will be saying, peace and safety. Now look at how the trillion-dollar deal is being described. From the White House, solidified partnership. Historic security agreement. Path to lasting peace in the Middle East. From Saudi Arabia, strengthening stability. Ensuring regional security. Building prosperity for future generations. From media, the deal of the century. A new era of peace. Economic prosperity pact. Peace. Safety. Security. Stability. Prosperity. Exactly what Paul said people would be proclaiming right before sudden destruction. Now, I'm not saying the trillion-dollar deal itself brings destruction, but I am saying it's creating the conditions, the mindset, the framework, the false confidence that lead to the peace and safety deception Paul warned about. Warning number 3. See that no one deceives you. Matthew 24:4. Matthew 24:3-4. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming, and of the end of the world? And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. The very first thing Jesus says about the end times is, don't be deceived. Not, don't be afraid. Not, watch for signs. The first warning is, don't be deceived, because deception will be the primary weapon of the enemy in the last days. How the trillion-dollar deal could deceive. Let me show you 3 ways this deal could function as part of end times deception. Deception number 1. False security. People will believe that economic prosperity and military alliances guarantee safety. They'll trust in F-35s, AI technology, and trillion-dollar investments instead of in God. Psalm 27. Some trust in chariots, and some in horses. But we will remember the name of the Lord our God. Modern version. Some trust in F-35s, AI chips, and trillion-dollar deals. But we trust in God. Deception number 2. False peace. The world will believe that the Middle East conflict is finally being resolved. They'll point to the Abraham Accords, the U.S.-Saudi alliance, potential Israeli-Saudi normalization, and economic integration as proof that lasting peace is achievable. But the Bible predicts the opposite. Peace agreements will be broken. The covenant will be violated. War will come. Deception number 3. Conditioning for the mark. Revelation 13:16-17. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. The Antichrist will control all commerce through a mark. No one can buy or sell without it. How do you implement that globally? You need digital infrastructure, AI, data centers, computing power, biometric technology, cashless payment systems, surveillance networks, global economic integration. The trillion-dollar deal is funding exactly that infrastructure. Not for the mark. The Antichrist hasn't risen yet. But the technology is being built, tested, and deployed. When the Antichrist comes, the infrastructure will be ready. All he'll need to do is take control of existing systems. Big flashy deals prepare for the Antichrist's system. Revelation 13:3-4. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? all the world wondered after the beast. Why? Because he'll perform economic miracles. He'll solve crises. He'll bring prosperity. And people will wonder, who is like him? Who can match his power? Who can solve problems the way he does? The trillion-dollar deal is conditioning people to think that way. To look at massive economic packages and think, this is the solution. This will save us. This leader can fix everything. It's diplomatic theater. It's impressive. It's real. But prophecy calls it preparation, stage setting, conditioning for what comes next. The pattern is clear. Peace and safety proclaimed. Sudden destruction follows. Signs and wonders displayed. People deceived into following the lie. Economic prosperity promised. Mark of the beast implemented. We're not in the fulfillment yet, but we're watching the setup, the conditioning, the preparation, and that brings us to the final discovery. Where does this all lead? What's the global pattern? How does the trillion-dollar deal fit into the bigger picture of end times alignment? Let me show you how every piece is moving into position. Number 5, the global pattern. The Middle East is aligning for the final conflict. We've examined the deal. We've identified the nations. We've traced the prophetic connections. We've exposed the deception patterns. Now, let's zoom out and see the big picture. Because what's happening isn't just about Saudi Arabia and the United States. It's about the entire world aligning exactly as end times prophecy predicted. The two camps, East versus West. End times prophecy describes two major power blocks in the last days. Camp number 1, the Western Alliance. Revived Roman Empire, Europe. Western trading powers, America, possibly. Allied Middle Eastern nations, Saudi Arabia, UAE, potentially Israel through peace agreements. Camp number 2, the Eastern Alliance. Russia, Magog, Iran, Persia, China, kings of the East, other nations hostile to Israel. And the trillion-dollar deal is solidifying which nations belong to which camp. Saudi Arabia aligns with the West. Through the trillion-dollar investment, Saudi Arabia is cementing its position in the Western camp. Economically, investing in U.S. infrastructure, technology, energy. Militarily, buying American weapons, designated as major non-NATO ally. Technologically, partnering with Silicon Valley on AI, partnering with U.S. on nuclear energy. Strategically, sharing intelligence, coordinating regional policy. Saudi Arabia is not sitting on the fence. They've chosen a side. Iran aligns with the East. While Saudi Arabia moves west, Iran moves east. The chessboard. Ezekiel described as being arranged. For 2,000 years, the nations weren't aligned. For most of history, Russia didn't exist as a nation, formed in 1547. Iran was Persia, but not a modern nation-state. Turkey was the Ottoman Empire. Israel didn't exist from 70 AD to 1948. Saudi Arabia didn't exist, formed in 1932. America didn't exist, formed in 1776. The modern nation-states required for Ezekiel 38 to be fulfilled didn't exist for most of history. But now, every single nation is in place. Every alliance is forming. Every economic tie is being established. And the trillion-dollar deal just moved the most important piece on the board. Saudi Arabia, firmly into the Western camp, allied with the United States, positioned to protest, but not fight, when Russia and Iran invade Israel.